Welcome Home is an ARG puppet horror website, and this video will have spoilers for all that's happened so far in the story, so please, if you haven't already, check out the website. The link will be in the description, and trust me when I say there's no better feeling than finding all of the secrets and looking at the amazing art on it, so please check it out. Alright, now that hopefully all of you know about Welcome Home, I'd like to talk about something that's always been on my mind, but I've never really been able to describe it until now, and that's how Welcome Home creates fear. Because I think the new Halloween audio showcases what's so perfect about it. It somehow managed to be one of the scariest things I've listened to that wasn't really scary at all. There are multiple ways things can make you feel fear, but in simple terms, it's a bit like having two people, and they're both about to go on a boat ride. It's a slow boat ride, but at the end of it there's a sudden drop. If you tell the first person there's a sudden drop, and you don't tell the second person anyways, these two people will both feel fear, but in different ways. Because the first person will have the dread building up the whole time, concentrating on every slight move or stop, thinking, is it gonna happen now? And every time it doesn't happen, it will build up more fear. Person 2 will pay no mind to anything, and will be like a normal boat ride, but the drop will have a more fearful reaction because it's out of the blue. Of course, this is just in simple terms, and not one of them is better than the other, and I'd even argue that media like DDLC does both of them. But with Welcome Home specifically, it definitely takes a first-person approach. Because even though it might look like a cute kid show on the outside, there is no hiding it's a horror anywhere. Outside of the media, it's always described as a horror. Even in the media, in like the first page, it will say something weird, so you're like, oh, something's off about this. It definitely gives away that it's a horror, there's no hiding it, and it's to its advantage, I'd say. So going into a 20-minute long audio about a Halloween special in a series you know is horror is definitely going to make you assume something scary will be in it. And this is how it builds dread. It starts as you'd expect. All the characters gather around for a fun and not very scary Halloween party to tell scary stories. Everything down to the music, voice acting, and writing feels like a kid's show. They really have the authentic charm to it. The characters are funny and charming, and it plays out how you'd expect it to. The audio is fuzzy, but it's to be expected. Again, it's the authentic feeling of it. It's supposed to be like an old record. And there's other audio like this where nothing really scary happens at all, but the more it goes on, especially since it's really long, you kind of expect something to happen. Even below the audio, it says that a part will be distorted. And even though, it could be a normal glitch, but with the context of it being a horror, you definitely expect something much more. And speaking of context, there's another thing that adds on to this dread of expecting something to happen, and that, of course, is our wonderful neighbor, Wally Darling, one of the characters of Welcome Home. There's not too much known about him horror-wise. He could be a villain, he could be in need of help, he could have any role, really. After all, the story of Welcome Home is still continuing, and we've got a long way to go. But one thing is for certain with him, weird, creepy things seem to happen around him. Most of the horror from the series so far seems to be involving him in some way. So given that context, of course the part that scared me the absolute most in the audio is when he volunteered to tell a scary story. All of the scary stories from before were to be expected, like about squirrels or bad business decisions. Things that aren't that scary. More so silly stories. Wally begins to talk, there is clunky music, and of course it still sounds like a fun kid's show, but it definitely unsettled me on my first viewing. And the other thing about Wally is that he talks slowly, and has a lot of pauses in his speech. Although I'd say it's in the perfect middle ground of the story that it doesn't kill the dread building up, but it actually enhances it. Because too long of pauses you could get a little bit bored and no longer feel fear, and too little there'd be no suspense. But he had that perfect middle ground where it was just about, you were anticipating every word he was going to say, and it definitely left you on edge. The story had a lot of and thens in it, and every time he says it, it's like a bump in the boat ride. Is this where it's going to drop? Somehow, Welcome Home made me scared of a story about having a nice day and looking at a tree. Because truth be told, nothing scary did happen in Wally's story. It definitely felt a little silly after the fact how I held my breath and was listening intensely. It was only scary because of my prior knowledge of Wally from before. but it's made so perfectly. I'm sure you could show it to someone who knows nothing about Welcome Home and they'd just see it like a normal kid's show. Although when it gets to Sally's story, that's when the dread pays off. Because her story is a scary story. How it glitches out before she tells it in the beginning leads away to the true horror of it all. The music cuts out, which always makes things uncomfortable, in the best way. And her once fuzzy voice turns clear as she talks about a monster lurking in the night. The way Sally's voice actor tells the story is perfect. And what's even scarier is, as a viewer, we have no clue if the story she tells is true to their world or not. The build-up to this scene is what makes it. It's earned. On its own, it definitely could have worked. Having everything be absolutely perfect until then, it could have worked too. But having that slow build-up of knowing something is going to happen and almost tricking the viewer in such a natural way that it wouldn't be noticed by anyone without the context, it's so perfect. After thinking far too much about it, I think the normalcy is what makes it so scary. Throughout the whole entire website, there are small things, Morse code that just says hello, and glitches that just seem to be normal glitches and nothing more. Building yourself up for something scary and then getting something simple like that sometimes makes it more dreadful, because you know the scary part has to happen eventually, so it just gets bigger and bigger in your mind. So you're like, oh gosh, what's gonna happen now? And then when it actually gives you something scary, it sort of amplifies that because of all the dread you've built up from before. But feel free to tell me what you think in the comments.